She said it like I'd offered her a used sock. "We don't do homemade gifts, Mabel," Beth said, lifting the soft wrapped bundle from the box like it was something contagious. "It's just not our thing." She smiled. That tight, polite smile she saves for waiters who forget the lemon slice in her water. Then turned to my son. "Right, Tom." And Tom, my only son, the boy I raised through snowstorms and layoffs and his father's slow death, looked down into his wine glass and said nothing. I didn't say anything either. I just nodded and tucked my hands under the table so no one would see how they trembled. They always tremble a little now, especially in the cold. And that morning, when I wrapped those sweaters, 6 of them, 1 for each family member, even Beth, my fingers ached so badly I had to take breaks between the stitches. But I did it. I always do it. Every Christmas, every birthday. It's what I have. That night, I stayed just long enough to help Rebecca, my granddaughter, clear the dessert plates. She hugged me when I left. That quiet kind of hug you give when you know the person needs it, but might be too proud to say so. She's 16 now, still sweet, but watching the world sharpen her edges. When I got home, I set the box of unopened gifts on my kitchen table. The wrapping paper I'd chosen was silver with tiny blue snowflakes. Simple, but elegant. I'd tied each with navy ribbon. I sat there for a long time just looking at them, the neat little row of packages. They looked so hopeful, waiting to be chosen, like I used to be. The house was quiet. Too quiet, really. No hum of the dishwasher, no voice from the TV in the corner, just me and the radiator ticking as it struggled against the December cold. I made myself a cup of weak tea, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and thought about what Beth had said. We don't do homemade gifts. When did that happen? When did things start needing price tags to be worthy? I looked down at my hands, the veins like rivers, the skin thin and freckled with age. These hands held my baby through the nights when he had croup. These hands buried my husband. These hands cleaned houses, cooked meals, paid bills, knit scarves when there was no money for store-bought. They've given so much, and still they are not enough. The next morning, I called the shelter. It's a small place, just 6 blocks from here. I used to volunteer there years ago, before my knees got bad. A woman named Carly answered. I asked if they might need warm clothes, adult sizes, brand new. She sounded surprised, even before I told her what I was offering. "Yes," she said, her voice lifting. "Absolutely, we do." So I wrapped the sweaters again, but differently this time. I took off the name tags that said to Tom and to Beth and to Rebecca, and replaced them with simple notes. Stay warm. You matter. This was made with love. Then I put on my old coat and boots, and I walked them over. Carly met me at the door, young and pink-cheeked from the cold, in a hat too big for her head. When she saw the sweaters, she blinked hard. "These are beautiful," she said, holding one up. "You made them?" I nodded. "Handmade is the best kind," she said. That's when I felt it, just a flicker. Something warm in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride, not quite. Just a kind of rightness, like I had put something back where it belonged. I didn't stay long. Carly thanked me again and promised they'd be given to people who truly needed them. As I walked back home, the cold didn't bite quite so hard. My house was still empty, my tea still weak. But when I looked at my hands, they didn't tremble as much. And for the first time that Christmas, I didn't feel unwanted, just unseen. And that I could work with. The shelter smelled like strong coffee and old wood. familiar, in a way that tugged at me, like the scent of my childhood schoolhouse or the back room at church where the women used to sort donated clothes. Carly led me inside, careful to take the bag from my arms before I could insist on carrying it myself. "You don't have to do all this," she said. But there was a shine in her eyes that said she was glad I had. The sweaters were gone within the hour. I sat quietly on a bench near the hallway, watching. A man in a threadbare coat took the navy pullover I'd knit for Tom. He pulled it on right there in the hallway, over his flannel shirt, and smiled down at himself with a kind of quiet disbelief. A teenage girl, hair tangled, sleeves too short, chose the dusty rose one that had been for Rebecca. She clutched it to her chest before disappearing into the back room. No one asked who made them. No one asked what store they came from, how much they cost, whether they were in fashion. They only saw warmth, something soft, something offered without price. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel embarrassed about the things my hands could still do. They mattered here. Carly brought me tea in a chipped mug with snowflakes on the side. "Sit as long as you like," she said. "People are calmer when you're here. You have one of those presences." I laughed, a dry, surprised sound. "First, I've heard that in a while." She sat next to me, folding her arms across her chest. "You know, we had a donor last year, corporate guy, big name, dropped off a trunk full of jackets with the tags still on. And they were appreciated, don't get me wrong. But the people here, they gravitated to the hand-knit scarves, the handmade mittens. It's like they could feel the care in them, like it soaked in through the wool." I looked at her, and something pinched at my throat. "Do you think people can tell?" I asked. "When something's been made with not just hands, but with intention?" Carly didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Every stitch says, 'I thought of you,' even if you never met." She stood then, off to help a man struggling with his zipper. I stayed on the bench, hands around the warm mug, watching as the small, invisible miracles of kindness moved through the room. Later, when I got home, my house felt a little less hollow. I made soup from scratch, just for myself, and ate it by the window with no TV on, no radio buzzing. Just silence. The honest kind, not the lonely one. I thought about that man in the navy sweater, about the way he had looked at himself, hands brushing down the sleeves like he was surprised he deserved to feel warm. Tom hadn't touched his gift. Neither had Beth. Not even Rebecca, though I think she would have, if her mother hadn't stopped her. A knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Rebecca was standing there in her school jacket, her cheeks flushed, her breath fogging in the air. "I went back for the sweater," she said, "but it was gone." I blinked. "Sweetheart, what?" "I saw the wrapping paper in the trash. The ribbon, too. I recognized it." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. "So I went to your house. Just to say, I'm sorry." Something inside me softened and hurt all at once. "You don't have to apologize, darling. It's not your fault." No. But I didn't say anything when Mom said that stuff. I wanted to, but... "You're 16, I interrupted gently. "You're not supposed to carry all that yet." She looked at me then, her eyes so full of love and guilt and confusion that I had to reach out and hug her. She folded into my arms like she used to when she was small. "I loved that sweater," she whispered. "I wish I'd taken it when you handed it to me." I smiled. "There'll be more, I promise." She didn't stay long. Homework, curfew, but she left with a container of soup and one of my old scarves, not wrapped, not labeled, just warm. After she left, I stood in my front room for a long time. My hands were still. My heart was not. Maybe this was how it would begin. Not with grand gestures or confrontations, but with one girl who still remembered how to be kind. One stitch at a time. The first thing I ever knit was crooked. It was a scarf, more lumpy than long, the yarn too tight in some places and loose in others. I was 9. My mother had given me the needles to keep my hands busy during the long winter evenings when the power flickered and we huddled by the stove. "You won't get it perfect," she said, her fingers flying through her own row of stitches, "but you'll get it done." She was right. I did. Crooked or not, it kept my neck warm through 2 winters and made me feel like I'd made something that mattered. I hadn't thought about that scarf in years, not until the night after Rebecca came by. I found myself in the attic, rummaging through old boxes, the kind you keep moving from house to house but never open. There it was, folded between a school notebook and an old photo of my parents. The scarf looked even smaller than I remembered. Faded now, soft from time, its edges frayed. But when I touched it, the feeling came rushing back. That mix of pride and clumsiness, the joy of making something with my own 2 hands. That scarf led to dozens more. I knit my first hat when I was 12, socks by 15. Sweaters came later, once I was married and expecting Tom. There's a photograph of him, only 6 months old, wrapped in a tiny green pullover with wooden buttons. I made it during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come and my ankles swelled like balloons. It was the only thing I could control back then, the loops and rows, the rhythm of it. Life kept moving whether I was ready or not, but knitting moved at my pace. When my husband lost his job at the steel plant in '78, we barely scraped by. I knit gifts because we had no money for anything else. I remember Tom asking once why his toys didn't come in boxes like the ones his friends had. "Because ours come with love inside," I told him. He believed it then. At 5, he still held my hand when we crossed the street and made me birthday cards with stick figures and hearts. Somewhere along the way, those hands stopped reaching for mine. It's strange. You spend so much of your life giving, not because anyone asked, but because it's what you do. And then one day someone tells you it's not enough. Not the right kind of giving, not polished, not store-bought. Beth hadn't meant to be cruel, I suppose. Or maybe she had. She has a way of speaking that turns dismissal into politeness, like a velvet hammer. But I'd been watching her for years now. How she narrows her eyes at my old coat, how she sighs when I bring dessert in a Tupperware instead of a bakery box. She wasn't always like that. When she and Tom were first dating, she used to ask me about recipes, about Tom's childhood. She laughed easily then, wore flats, not heels. I remember she once complimented a shawl I was knitting, said she'd never learned how to make anything with her hands. "It's like magic," she'd said. I wonder when magic turned into embarrassment. The attic was cold. My knees ached from crouching, but I kept digging through the boxes. I found old birthday cards, yellowed baby socks, a photograph of Tom in the sweater I made for his 6th birthday. Red, with a white stripe. He'd refused to take it off for days. I sat back on my heels and let myself remember. Not just the hard parts, the good ones too. The sound of Tom's laughter when we danced in the kitchen. The way his hair stuck up in the back no matter how I combed it. The way he used to run to me when he was hurt, even if all he needed was a Band-Aid and a kiss. I miss that boy. I don't know where he went. But I do know one thing. That little boy had a mother who never stopped loving him. Still doesn't. But love doesn't mean silence. Love doesn't mean shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. That night, I came downstairs with a box full of old yarn. I sat in my chair, picked up my needles, and cast on a new row. No names, no labels, no tags, just warmth. Tom called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. The sound of his voice, so careful, so clipped, reached out of the little speaker like a stranger. "Hi, Mom. Beth said you left early the other night. Just wanted to check in, make sure everything's okay." A pause. Just a second too long. "Anyway, Merry Christmas. We'll talk soon." I deleted it without saving. What was there to save? The next call came a few hours later. Same number. This time he sounded more upbeat, trying for casual. "I think Rebecca left a container at your place. Some soup or something? She said she stopped by. Beth was surprised, said you didn't mention it. Just let me know." I didn't call back. Instead, I poured myself a fresh cup of tea and sat by the window, the scarf from my attic across my knees. I'd washed it the night before, gently, by hand. And now it smelled faintly of lavender and old wool. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't even calling to ask. He was checking, reporting, making sure his wife's version of events matched mine. Beth had always been like that, quietly territorial. She made it clear early on that her home was hers. I was a guest, welcomed, but never fully invited. There's a difference. For years, I told myself it was fine, that it didn't matter whether I was asked to bring dessert or just tolerated, that it was enough to be near my son, near Rebecca. But the truth is, tolerance is a poor substitute for love. And now, at nearly 80, I've run out of patience for pretending otherwise. The phone rang again around 5. I didn't answer. Later, I checked the message. "Mom, I don't know what's going on. Beth said you seemed upset, and now you're not answering. I really don't want this to turn into something it doesn't need to be. Can you just call me back? Something it doesn't need to be." He still doesn't get it. This isn't about sweaters. It's not about the gifts. It's about the years. The slow erosion of respect, of affection. The way I've been shrinking myself so long to fit into their lives that I barely recognize my own. After dinner, I sat at the small table near the back window and pulled out an old notepad. I started making a list, not of grievances, not of complaints, but of all the things I've done quietly, the things no one thanks you for, the forgotten kindnesses. I wrote, paid for their down payment, gave Beth my mother's ring when she got engaged, babysat Rebecca for 4 straight weekends when Beth's sister was sick, never said no when they asked for help, even when I had to shuffle bills to make it work, drove an hour with soup when Tom had the flu and Beth was away on business, never told Rebecca about the time they considered sending her to a different school to save money. The list went on. 3 pages before I stopped. My hand was tired. And yet somehow I was still the one made to feel like an inconvenience. The phone didn't ring again that night. Instead, the silence settled, thick and cold, around my little house. I stood up, wrapped the scarf around my neck, that crooked, imperfect first attempt, and walked to the front door. Outside, the snow had started to fall again. Fine, quiet flakes. I walked to the curb and looked up and down the street. Lights blinked in windows. Shadows moved behind curtains. Families together. Laughter from somewhere down the block. I wasn't angry. Not in the way Tom probably feared. I was something slower, sadder, steadier, resigned, maybe. But underneath that, something else had started to take root. Resolve, not to punish, not to withdraw, just to stop asking for scraps. It wasn't sudden, the forgetting. It never is. It starts in small ways. A missed birthday call, a rushed dinner, a holiday where you're asked to bring something light, nothing that takes effort. And you smile, and you nod, and you swallow the lump because you don't want to seem needy. Because needing, after a certain age, becomes inconvenient. I sat that morning by the kitchen window with my tea gone cold, watching the postman shuffle through the snow. He waved. A young man with a kind smile and a red cap pulled too low, and I waved back. A small thing, but it steadied me. No mail, not that day. Beth sends digital cards now. Eco-conscious, she says. But I remember the last real card she gave me. 7 years ago, maybe 8. With pre-printed text and a tiny scrawl of her name underneath. No message. No warmth. As if her presence alone should be enough. I once believed that if I just kept giving, they'd see me. That if I made myself helpful, quiet, generous, if I never complained, never argued, never made them uncomfortable, then maybe one day they'd look at me with the kind of softness I used to see in Tom's eyes when he was little. But kindness without boundaries turns into something else. Something brittle. Something people stop noticing. That afternoon, I pulled out the small wooden box I kept in the back of my bedroom drawer. Inside were old receipts, notes, a few crumpled photographs. Proof of a life spent in service of other people's needs. There was the check stub from when Tom and Beth bought their first car. I'd loaned them $3,000. Just for a couple months, they said. I never asked for it back. I didn't want to embarrass them. There was a note from Tom, written in messy teenage scrawl, thanking me for being the best mom in the universe. He must have been 10. I kept it all this time. I held it to my chest, just for a moment. When did I become a transaction to him? A line in his family's budget? Beth talks about boundaries often, how it's healthy to have them. But boundaries, it seems, only go one way in their house. I was expected to give, to show up, to contribute, but not to speak, not to disagree, not to need anything in return. When I gave Beth my mother's engagement ring, she didn't say thank you. She said, "It's a bit small. I'll get it reset." That was the beginning, I think, or maybe the end. I'm not sure anymore. But I remember the silence that followed. The way Tom didn't speak up. The way I laughed it off, too embarrassed to let the hurt show. I told myself then that it didn't matter, that the ring was just a thing. But it wasn't. It was the last piece of my mother I had, and I gave it to her thinking it would mean something. It didn't. The next morning, I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, patient. I told her I wanted to review the automatic transfers from my account. Just a routine check, I said. But my voice shook, and I think she heard it. It wasn't just about the money. It was about drawing a line. One small, firm step toward reclaiming the space I used to live in. Not as their ATM, not as their silent witness, but as someone with a spine. I made a list. Stop the monthly transfer to Tom's joint account. Cancel the automatic payment for Rebecca's school lunch program. Remove Beth as authorized on my pharmacy account. Change the emergency contact form at the clinic from Tom to Rebecca. Each call I made felt like pulling a splinter from my skin, sharp but relieving. No one noticed. Not that day. No phone calls. No accusations. No pleas. Just silence. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt earned. Rebecca showed up just after lunch, cheeks flushed from the cold, her dark hair wet with melting snow. "I brought cookies," she said, holding up a paper bag with a shy smile. "Store-bought? Don't judge me." I laughed, the sound rougher than I remembered. "I don't judge. I just bake better." She grinned and followed me inside, kicking off her boots by the door like she'd done since she was little. Back then, she used to carry a stuffed elephant everywhere and ask questions faster than I could answer them. Now she was taller, sharper, with that same searching gaze, like she was always trying to find what wasn't being said. "I know something happened," she said, once we sat down at the table. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But I know." I poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. "Your mother didn't like the sweaters," I said simply. "I know," Rebecca replied. "I mean, she said something after you left, about setting expectations, and how she didn't want homemade stuff cluttering up the holidays." I looked down at my cup. "Dad didn't say anything," she added. "He just sat there." "Of course he did." "Do you want to know something?" she said, voice softer. "That blue sweater, the one with the tiny cable pattern down the sleeves, that was the nicest thing I've gotten in years." I blinked. "You never wore it." "I didn't get the chance. Mom made me give it back before I even opened it properly. Said it was too much." I reached over and took her hand. It was cold, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." She looked at me, eyes bright. "Don't be. You did nothing wrong. You never do. That's kind of the problem." We sat in silence for a while, the old clock ticking on the wall, the radiator humming gently in the corner. Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a folded square of soft gray wool. "I found this in your attic the other day, when I was looking for the soup container." I opened it slowly. It was one of the first hats I'd ever made her, tiny, with a pom-pom that had flattened over the years. "I wore it every day until 3rd grade," she said. "Then Mom said it didn't match my coat, and she got rid of it. I cried for a week." I touched the yarn gently. The edge was frayed, but the stitchwork had held up. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because I want you to know I remember. I remember everything. The scarves, the mittens, the way you used to tuck a note into my lunchbox when you packed it, the way your house smells like cinnamon, the way you never, ever made me feel like I had to earn love." My throat closed. Mom doesn't get it. Maybe Dad doesn't either. But I do. I looked at her then. Really looked. Not as a child, not as a granddaughter, but as a young woman who saw more than I'd realized, who carried both her parents' sharpness and my quiet. And maybe, just maybe, something stronger too. "I'm not angry with them," I said finally. I'm tired of pretending I don't notice." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That's fair." She stayed for a long time that day. We didn't talk about the bank transfers or the missed calls piling up on my phone. Instead, we baked a new batch of cookies, cinnamon and oatmeal, soft in the middle. And she told me about a boy in her English class who read poetry out loud, like he was auditioning for something. We laughed. We washed dishes. She asked me how to do a basic stitch, and I showed her. Her hands were clumsy, but eager. "I want to make something for you this time," she said, tongue between her teeth as she concentrated. "It probably won't be very good." I looked at her hands, young, capable, trying. "It'll be perfect," I said. "The house feels different after she leaves, not louder, not even warmer, just less hollow." I washed the mugs by hand, even though I could have left them in the sink. I always do that when I'm thinking. Clean something, fold something, keep my hands moving so my mind doesn't get too loud. There's a box under my bed I haven't opened in years. I slide it out that evening. It still smells faintly of cedar and thyme. Inside are old letters from Daniel, my husband, written on yellowing paper with his neat, looping handwriting. He was never much of a talker in person, but on paper, he was tender, almost poetic. I unfold the first one. It's dated 1968, the year after Tom was born. Mabel, I know the baby's been keeping you up, and I know I've been short with you lately. I'm sorry for that. I'm just tired and scared, and sometimes I forget how lucky I am to have you. This morning, I saw you holding him, the way your face looked, and it reminded me why I married you. You make a hard life softer. Love, D. I read it twice, then 3 more times. He never spoke like that out loud, not even close. But those letters, a stack of maybe 2 dozen, are full of that quiet, fierce devotion I remember most in his silences. I pull out another, dated during his hospital stay. Mabel, don't worry about the bills. Don't worry about Tom. Just promise me one thing. When I go, don't let them take all of you with me. You still have a whole life, and it doesn't belong to anyone else. Use it. All of it. Even the soft parts. Especially the soft parts. D. I hadn't remembered that line. Not exactly. But now it burned in my chest. Even the soft parts. That's the part they've tried to rub off me all these years. The softness. As if kindness and giving were symptoms of weakness. As if being easy to overlook meant you had nothing left inside. Daniel never thought that. Not even when he was dying. Not even when I cried beside his bed, clutching his hand because I didn't know what else to do. He squeezed my fingers then and said, "Still here. That's the good part." After he passed, people stopped saying his name. That's what they do, isn't it? As if death is contagious, as if saying Daniel might bring your own end closer. But I say it, sometimes out loud, sometimes just in my head when I water the garden or mend something by hand. His toothbrush is still in the cabinet. His flannel shirt still hangs in the back of the closet. Grief is strange like that, soft and heavy, with no expiration date. I set the letters carefully back in the box, then push it under the bed again, not to hide it, just to keep it safe. Before bed, I sit in the living room and pick up the needles again. Not to make gifts, not to prove anything, just for me. The yarn is a deep maroon, the color Daniel liked best on me. Makes your cheeks look like apples, he used to say. I smile at that. The radio plays something slow, and I let the rhythm of the stitches settle my mind. The house is quiet, but not lonely. It's full, with old words and new ones, with Rebecca's voice, with Daniel's letters, with the things I've remembered just in time. Soft doesn't mean small. Soft doesn't mean forgotten. Soft, I think, is the strongest thing I've got. The woman at the bank was younger than I expected. She wore glasses with thick black frames and had a pen clipped to her sweater like it was armor. When she called my name, she smiled. Too polite, too rehearsed. The way people smile at old ladies they expect to be confused. "I'd like to review all scheduled transfers from my account," I said as I sat down, keeping my voice calm, clear. Her hands moved to the keyboard, tapping quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Harris. Is there something in particular?" "All of them," I interrupted. "I want a list. Then I want to cancel them." She blinked. "All of them?" "Yes." I folded my hands in my lap. They weren't shaking. She pulled up my records. I watched her eyes move down the screen. A frown formed before she caught herself and masked it with another polite smile. There are quite a few. I know. Another pause. I can suspend them today, she said, but for full cancellation and to revoke access for authorized users, we'll need your signature on several forms. I brought a pen, I replied. Her smile became real then, just a little. All right, let's begin. We went line by line. The mortgage payment Tom had set up in my name after refinancing his second home, gone. The automatic contributions to Rebecca's school account, even though she now worked part-time, gone. The utility bill tied to their lake house, the one they claimed was family shared, gone. There were 16 in total. 16 quiet little ties I had allowed them to knot around me over the years. Each time, I had said yes. Each time, I had told myself it was love. But love shouldn't feel like silence, like obligation, like something you do because otherwise you won't be invited next year. By the time we finished, the air felt clearer. Is there anything else I can help you with, Mrs. Harris? The woman asked. Yes, I said. I'd like to remove my son from my emergency contact information, replace him with my granddaughter. She nodded, typing again. Are you sure? She asked gently. I'm sure, I said. And I was. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit my face like a second wind. The sky was pale, the wind sharp. But I walked slowly to the bus stop, head held higher than it had been in years. Back home, the answering machine was blinking. 2 messages, both from Tom. I played them. Mom, I just saw some alerts from the bank. Something's wrong. Call me. Beep. Seriously, Mom, what's going on? Beth says you've been acting strange. We need to talk, please. I didn't call him back. I didn't need to. He'd feel it, not the money. That could be replaced. But the shift. The space where my silence used to be was now something firmer, less yielding. Something they couldn't step over anymore. That evening, I sat down and wrote a note. Not to Tom, not to Beth. To Rebecca. Dear Rebecca, if something changes in the weeks ahead, I want you to understand why. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you reminded me what it means to feel seen. That alone is more than I can say for most people. I've spent too long confusing love with sacrifice. Too long letting myself believe that quietness was the same as peace. It's not. There's more to come. I'm not done yet. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter and placed it inside a small envelope. Tucked it into my top drawer, beneath the lavender sachet she gave me 2 birthdays ago. I wasn't afraid anymore. Carly met me at the shelter door with red cheeks and a fleece vest zipped to her chin. Mabel, she beamed, you came back. I said I would, I replied, stepping into the warm hallway. The smell of coffee and dryer sheets filled the air, familiar, grounded. I brought a few things, I added, mostly yarn, some extra socks, a few scarves. She took the bag from me gently. You didn't have to. But I wanted to. The front lounge was busy, but quiet. A boy about 10 sat curled in a chair reading a comic book, his coat several sizes too big. Nearby, a woman dozed in a corner with her head against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Come sit, Carly said. I'll make you some tea. She brought me to a back room I hadn't seen before. It looked like an office, and a break room had collided. Old file cabinets, a kettle, boxes of donated goods. A radio hummed softly in the background. You have a calm about you, Carly said, pouring hot water into mismatched mugs. The others feel it too. You'd be surprised how people change just by having someone sit beside them who doesn't flinch. I smiled. I'm too old to flinch. She laughed. That might be it. We sat in a kind silence for a while, sipping our tea. You remind me of someone, she said eventually. My grandmother. She raised me when my mom wasn't around. She knit, too, all the time. Couldn't sit without her needles moving. She sounds like she was someone. She was everything. She died before I could tell her that properly. Carly stirred her tea, then set the spoon down. Anyway, when I saw those sweaters the other day, I don't know, something clicked. I didn't say anything, just listened. There's something sacred about it, she continued, about taking time, real time, to make something for a stranger. Not because they earned it, not because they'll post about it or give you anything back. Just because they exist. That's rare, Mabel. I looked down at my hands, the same hands I'd once thought were becoming invisible. Carly saw them. She saw what they could do. I was thinking, she added, maybe you'd like to come by more regularly. Not just with things, but with yourself. We have people who knit here, but they don't really know what they're doing. We could use someone who does. Someone like you. I stared at the chipped mug in my hands. For a moment, I imagined it. A small table, maybe, in a quiet corner of the shelter. A few chairs. A ball of yarn rolling across the floor. Someone sitting across from me, young, old, whoever, trying to cast on for the first time. I'd like that, I said. And I meant it. Later, before I left, Carly walked me out to the front. The boy with the oversized coat had fallen asleep, his comic book still open on his lap. He asked if he could keep the scarf, she whispered. The blue one. I told him it was his. That was the one I made for Rebecca. Carly looked at me. Then maybe it found the right home after all? I stood there for a long time after she went back inside, watching the snow fall over the empty street. No cars, no chatter. Just the kind of quiet that doesn't press down on you, but lifts something. For so long, I had stitched my worth into other people's comfort. Now I was stitching something else. Belonging, not borrowed, not begged for, but built. Loop by loop. It was the coat that gave her away. I was walking out of the corner store, a loaf of bread under my arm, when I saw her. Janine Forrester. Same auburn bob, same quick steps, same navy wool coat she'd worn since we were both still trying to impress our husbands. Janine, I called. She turned, squinting against the sun. Mabel? Mabel Harris? Well, I'll be damned. She walked toward me with arms open, and that same sly smile that always made me feel like we were in on a secret no one else knew. We hadn't spoken in, 10 years? Her husband died the same year Daniel did. After that, we drifted, as people do. A few cards, the odd run-in, but mostly just the passage of time, smooth and steady like riverstones. Still on Linden? She asked. I nodded. Still baking enough for an army? I laughed. Only half an army these days. We stood on the sidewalk like time hadn't touched us, but it had, of course. Her laugh lines were deeper, her eyes a little softer. I imagine I looked the same, worn, but still whole. Walk with me? She said. My legs need the excuse. We strolled slowly down the block, our bags swinging at our sides. She caught me up on her daughter's divorce, her grandson's scholarship. I told her about Rebecca, the shelter, the knitting. When I mentioned Tom and Beth, her mouth tightened. I always thought she was a bit brittle, she said carefully. Like thin ice, I replied. Pretty until it breaks. Janine looked at me then. Really looked. What finally did it? She asked. I knew what she meant. I shrugged. A sweater. She raised an eyebrow. I told her, piece by piece. Not everything, not the bank calls, not the letters under my bed, but enough. The dismissal, the silence, the slow erosion of something I'd thought was love. When I finished, she exhaled. You know, she said, when Gary died, I spent a year thinking I was too angry, too bitter. I kept trying to soften it, to be pleasant. Until one day, I realized I didn't owe anyone softness that hurt me to give. I stopped walking. What did you do? I stopped picking up the phone when I didn't want to. I stopped showing up where I wasn't valued. And I started remembering who I was before I started trimming myself down to fit into other people's houses. We stood there, just two old women in the winter sun, carrying bread and history. You always were stronger than you let on, she said. I had to be, I answered. It just took me too long to admit it. We said our goodbyes at the corner, promising to meet for coffee soon, and this time, meaning it. Back home, I put the bread on the counter and poured myself a glass of water. Then I looked around the house. The curtains I'd hemmed myself, the framed photo of Tom as a boy, the little cross-stitch Daniel made me try once. The life I'd filled with giving. It wasn't that I regretted the giving, only the way it had gone unseen. Now it would be different. Not because I was angry, but because I'd finally remembered how to stand. Beth's message came the next morning. I hadn't spoken to either of them in over a week. Just silence, long, indulgent silence. The kind people think will make you come crawling back. But I'd learned something in that quiet. I didn't miss them. I missed who I thought they were. Her text was short, clipped. Hi, Mabel. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot at Christmas. I didn't mean to offend you. Would love to talk. Maybe clear the air. Let me know when you're free. Not, I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just, we may have, and didn't mean. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put the kettle on. By the time the water boiled, another message came. Tom says the bank reversed a few payments. We're a bit confused. Maybe there's a misunderstanding there too. Anyway, it's the holidays. No need for tension. There it was. The real reason. I didn't respond. Later that afternoon, she called. I answered, because sometimes silence isn't power, it's permission. Hi, Mabel, she said. Her voice was light, falsely bright, like she'd practiced it. I wasn't sure if texting was okay, so I thought I'd just call. I said. A pause. I hope you're doing all right. We've all just been so busy. You know how it is. Not really, I replied. She laughed awkwardly. Well, I mean, with the kids and the job and everything. What do you want, Beth? More silence. Then, I think there's been some confusion with the accounts. Tom noticed some changes and, well, he thought maybe it was a mistake. It wasn't. I see. Another pause. Well, I suppose we just wanted to make sure everything's okay. With you. Emotionally. I almost laughed. Emotionally, I repeated. Yes, she said, voice tightening. I think it's fair to say things got a bit emotional over the gifts, and I may not have chosen my words very well. No, I said. You chose them very well. You said exactly what you meant. You always do. She took a breath. I could hear her trying to find a new tone, something softer, maybe even gracious. Well, she said, if there's anything we can do to ease the tension. There is, I interrupted. Stop pretending this is about confusion, or misunderstandings, or my feelings. It's not. It's about you being embarrassed by the woman who raised your husband, and Tom being too spineless to stop you. Mabel, I'm not finished. The steel in my voice surprised even me. I gave until it hurt. I bent until I almost disappeared. I paid for things you never even thanked me for. And all I asked in return was a little kindness. You couldn't manage that. So now, no. You don't get the sweaters. You don't get the checks. You don't get the easy version of me." Beth was silent. "Does Tom know you're calling?" I asked. Another pause. Then quietly, "He's sitting right here." "Then tell him I said this. The well is closed. If you want water, dig your own." I ended the call. Then I set the phone down and took a long breath. The house around me was quiet, but the air felt different. Lighter. Like a window had opened somewhere inside me. They wanted peace, but only the kind that came from me staying small. Not anymore. The lawyer's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same brass lamp on the corner of the desk. Same faint smell of old paper and lemon polish. Same thick silence that made even confident people clear their throat before speaking. "Mrs. Harris," said Ms. Daly, standing to shake my hand. "It's been a while." "Too long," I replied. "But I'm here now." She was a small woman, no taller than me, with a sharp gray bob and a sharper gaze. She'd handled Daniel's estate after he passed, helped me set up a basic will, and once told me, gently, that just because someone was family didn't mean they were entitled. I hadn't believed her then. Now I was ready. "I want to update my will," I said, sitting down, "and set up a trust." Ms. Daly nodded, already reaching for a notepad. "Do you want to walk me through the changes?" I took out a folded sheet of paper from my purse. "These are the things I want removed or redirected." She read it quietly. After a moment, she looked up. "Are you certain?" As certain as I was when I let them walk all over me for 20 years. Which is to say, more than I've ever been. We went through the assets slowly. The house, still fully in my name. The retirement account, comfortable but modest. The savings account that used to feed their mortgage and Rebecca's tuition, and even Beth's business expenses, all redirected now. "To whom will the trust be assigned?" Ms. Daly asked. "My granddaughter, Rebecca." "And the rest? What's not in the trust? I want divided between two organizations, the women's shelter and the food pantry." "No allocations to your son or his wife?" "None. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of something simpler. They hadn't earned it. Not my name, not my legacy, not my last gift." We spent the next hour going over the documents. I signed each one without hesitation. When we finished, she leaned back and studied me. "You know, I see a lot of people come through here full of regret. They want to do the right thing, but they're afraid it'll cause waves." "It will cause waves," I said. "But I've spent too long drowning quietly. I think a few waves are overdue." Ms. Daly smiled. "Then let's make it official." She printed everything while I waited in the lobby. The assistant offered me water, but I declined. I was full, not of food, not of fear, but of a calm I hadn't felt in decades. By the time I left, the sun had come out. A thin winter sun, yes, but bright all the same. I stopped at the shelter on the way home, dropping off another bag of yarn, some socks, and a tin of cookies I'd baked that morning. Carly wasn't in, but I left a note tucked in the tin, for the ones who remember what it means to be warm and who never make others beg for it. Back home, I opened the curtains wide and let the sun spill across the floor. My phone sat on the table. 2 missed calls from Tom. 1 from an unknown number, no voicemail, no message. Just silence again. But this time, it wasn't theirs. It was mine. He showed up on a Tuesday. No warning, no text, just a knock on the door. firm, familiar, and entirely unwelcome. I didn't hurry. Let him wait. When I opened it, Tom stood there with his hands in his coat pockets, his shoulders hunched against the cold. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, wordless. He walked in like he'd forgotten how small my house was. His eyes swept the room, maybe expecting to find a suitcase by the door or photos missing from the shelves. I said nothing, just waited. He sat on the edge of the armchair like it might bite. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. I want to understand." "Good," I said, "because I'm tired of explaining." He blinked, caught off guard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth didn't require volume. "I got a call from Ms. Daly," he said, "about the will, about the trust." I nodded once. "Why?" he asked. "After everything we've done together, after all these years." "Exactly," I said. "After all these years." He shook his head, his voice rising. "So you're just cutting us out? Giving everything away to strangers? To shelters?" "To people who thanked me," I said. "That's not fair." "Neither was your silence." He looked at me then, not angry, not pleading, just stunned. "You could have talked to me," he said. "You could have told me you felt this way." "I did," I said quietly. "In 1,000 little ways, in sweaters, in checks, in waiting at your door with a pie while Beth pretended not to see me." He didn't speak. "You let her decide who I could be in your life," I said. "And I went along with it because I thought that's what mothers do. They adapt. They disappear a little to make room." I took a breath. But I disappeared too much, and no one noticed. Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm sorry." I looked at him, my son, my once little boy, and I saw it. Not malice, not cruelty, just weakness. A softness in the wrong places. A man who'd learned to keep the peace by letting it cost other people everything. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I need space." "So that's it?" he asked. "You're done with us?" "I'm done pretending you didn't choose her comfort over my presence. I'm done financing a relationship that made me feel small." He rubbed a hand over his face. "Beth is complicated. She's not my complication anymore." Tom stood then, pacing the small room. "Rebecca's caught in the middle of this. She's not. She's the only one who saw me. And when people find out, what do I tell them? That your mother stopped shrinking." He opened his mouth, closed it again. At the door, he paused. "You really gave it all away?" "I gave it where it would grow." He looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe 10 different things. But in the end, he just nodded and stepped out into the cold. I closed the door behind him, gently. There was no slam, no bitterness. Just the quiet click of a boundary held. The snow had stopped by morning. Thin sunlight stretched across the sidewalk, catching on the icicles under the eaves. I pulled on my coat. The one Daniel always said made me look like a woman with somewhere to be, and filled my tote with 3 new scarves, 2 pairs of mittens, and a warm hat I'd just finished. At the shelter, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. Children chattered in the hallway, a woman hummed softly near the coffee pot, and Carly waved at me from behind a stack of donation forms. "Mabel," she said, coming out to meet me. "I was hoping we'd see you today." "It's Christmas morning," I said. "Where else would I be?" We brought the bundle to the front room. A tree stood in the corner, half the ornaments made of paper and pipe cleaners. A little boy with big eyes handed me a card. His name was Jonah. He had drawn a sweater and written, "Thank you," in crooked red letters. My heart clenched in that soft, aching way joy sometimes arrives. Carly led me into the common room, where a few volunteers had gathered. Someone had set up a table with hot cocoa, and on the couch, two teenage girls were trading gloves like secrets. I handed out what I'd brought. No tags, no labels, just warmth. They didn't ask who I was. They just smiled, said thank you, and pulled the scarves close around their necks like they'd been waiting all year for something to belong to them. Later, someone began reading poems aloud. Then a boy recited a story, his voice shaky but proud. One of the volunteers passed out paper and crayons, and a girl named Sophie asked if I could teach her to knit. "I don't have a grandma," she said, "but I like how you talk." I taught her the basic stitch, her small fingers clumsy but determined. She bit her lip in concentration, and I saw in her the same stubbornness Rebecca had shown weeks earlier, wrapped in soft effort. "You'll get it," I told her. "It just takes patience." She grinned. "You have a lot of that." "I didn't used to," I said. Carly sat beside me later, a plate of cookies in her hand. "We don't get many people like you." "Old?" I teased. "No," she smiled. "Steady, the kind that makes everyone else breathe easier." I didn't know what to say. So I just sat there, listening to the room, the laughter, the rustle of coats, the soft hum of people who were no longer trying to survive the day, but live it. I thought about all the years I'd spent making things for people who barely looked up. All the times I'd handed over pieces of myself wrapped in ribbon, hoping for a thank you, or even just a glance. Now, here, no one asked me to prove my usefulness. I wasn't a favor. I wasn't an obligation. I was someone who made things warm. That was enough. Before I left, Sophie handed me her drawing. A crooked scarf, a woman with big hands and silver hair, and a heart in the corner. "I'm going to make one just like yours," she said. "You already are," I whispered. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. The sidewalk sparkled. I walked home slowly, the cold brushing my cheeks, the card from Jonah tucked into my coat pocket like a secret. When I reached my door, I didn't go in right away. I stood there, looking out at the quiet street. No calls, no messages, no drama, just peace. Not the peace of being ignored, but the kind that comes when you finally decide you are not for sale. The letter came on New Year's Eve. Thick envelope, cream-colored paper, no return address. But I recognized Beth's handwriting right away. Tight, deliberate, too neat to be warm. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made myself tea, sliced the last piece of cranberry bread, and sat in my chair by the window as the light shifted across the floor. The trees outside stood bare and quiet, like they, too, were waiting. When I finally opened the envelope, 2 pages slid out. Beth's tone was careful, measured, almost sterile. She apologized, not in the way that matters, but the way that checks a box. "I'm sorry if I made you feel... It wasn't my intention to. This year has been stressful for everyone." I read it once, then again, just to be sure. Not a single line said, "I was wrong." She wanted reconciliation, she said, for the sake of family, for Rebecca, for Tom's peace of mind. She even wrote that handmade gifts have value too, as if she were offering a concession. Not an understanding, just a ceasefire. I folded the letter and set it aside. Then I took out a sheet of my own stationery. I didn't write back with anger, or hurt, or judgment. Just truth. Beth, I've come to learn that silence isn't the same as peace, that accommodating someone's comfort shouldn't require me to erase my own worth. I spent many years giving generously, not because I expected praise, but because I believed in love that showed up without keeping score. But love, when dismissed or devalued long enough, begins to rot. Quietly. Until there's nothing left but the echo of what you meant to someone who never truly saw you. I'm done giving where I am not welcome. I wish you health. I wish you clarity. I wish you, one day, the strength to offer the kind of softness you seem to fear. Mabel. I sealed the letter, placed it in an envelope, and walked it to the post box just before dusk. The air was sharp, the kind that stings your lungs in the first breath, but it felt clean, like exhaling something old. Back home, I turned off the lights and lit the candle Rebecca had given me. Lavender and cedar, soft and earthy. The flame flickered gently, casting long shadows across the walls. She was coming over tomorrow. Just her. We were going to bake cinnamon rolls, start a new scarf, and maybe, if she was feeling brave, talk about the things that mattered most. Who she wanted to be. What kind of woman she hoped to grow into. What kind of love she'd be willing to demand. I'd tell her everything I'd learned too late. That dignity doesn't come from being liked. That kindness isn't weakness unless you let them treat it that way. That soft women carry whole generations on their backs and are rarely thanked for it. But mostly, I'd show her by how I sit, how I speak, how I no longer fold. Because that's the only legacy I want to leave behind. Not a house, not a bank account, not a list of family names, but proof that you can outgrow silence, that you can choose where your love goes, that being unseen is not the same as being invisible, and that no one, not even blood, is entitled to your softness if they've never earned your grace. So to every woman reading this, especially those who've bent too far, too often, you don't have to apologize for outgrowing the role they wrote for you. You don't have to shrink so others can stretch. You can be warm and firm, gentle and unmovable. You can stop picking up the phone. You can say no and mean it. You can leave the table when the cost of staying is yourself. If this story found you, it was meant to. And if it stirred something inside you, don't let that feeling settle back into silence. Share it. Talk about it. Leave a comment. Send it to someone who still believes they have to earn their place by disappearing. And if no one ever told you before, you are allowed to take up space.